So as the inevitable heat death of the universe draws ever closer, so does the inevitable heat death of all of our favourite mercenaries. Which is a shame actually, because I might not have told you, but I really like these guys. So in this video, I thought it might be a funny idea to sit down and take a look at how I think, realistically, each Merc would meet their end. And if you stick around long enough, maybe I'll throw in some bonus characters at the end, because people like when I do that. There aren't really any rules or tribulations that I'm following for this, it pretty much just comes down to this is how I think this mercenary is going to die, and this is how I think they're going to get into that situation. So I think this is going to be a pretty fun one. And speaking of pretty, my wife. And speaking of fun, you should subscribe because she'd really like me to hit 9 billion subscribers before the end of the year. And once you're finished with this video, you can check out this other playlist on my channel which features a whole bunch of like-minded content. Because it turns out, TF2 is pretty fun to talk about in a silly way when there's not some 26-plus-year-old hairy man yelling in your ear about how much better it used to be. Let's start off this list with Demo Man, because I think this is probably the easiest one to ascertain. I think Demo is going to meet his end at the end of a bottle. Liver failure is a powerful thing. It's more powerful than love. It doesn't matter how much you love that bottle of Jack Daniels, eventually it's going to pull out a flip knife and it's going to go straight through you. Now, despite all of this, I think Demo has done fairly well for himself, considering how he's Scottish and the average Scottish life expectancy is 35. So the fact that he's probably either somewhere around that age or a bit older is, well, it's commendable. But Scotland, pyrotechnics and alcohol are a very, very dangerous combination, so eventually I think one day it will catch up with him. I think one day the doctor will tell him that he has severe liver failure and can't have another drop of alcohol, and then he'll immediately tell the doctor, then he'll immediately take another sip and die. And that'll be the end of Scotland as a country. Moving on to Spy next, this one is also an easy one. You see, lung cancer is a powerful thing. It's also more powerful than love. And the pack-a-day Spy smoking isn't exactly the kind that keeps the doctor away, because no fags do that, he's going to die. Now, to once again bring up the ages of our Mercs, Spy's probably somewhere in either his 50s or 60s, so if he were to get lung cancer, it probably wouldn't be too far away. And I don't really see him dying on the job either, because he's quite an intelligent man and has been a spy for a very long time. So I think the most realistic expectation for how Spy is going to die is that one day he will get a terminal diagnosis for lung cancer and he'll just live it out until he goes. Yeah, it's not a very funny way to end the segment, is it? So, I guess he could become Walter White, I don't know. Now, we'll talk about Soldier in a moment, because I want to take said moment to thank some of you. As to those who don't know, I recently launched my Patreon and YouTube membership service to shockingly good success, actually. And I'm very grateful, thank you very much. So, if you're someone who's interested in exclusive content like behind-the-scenes breakdowns and new videos, along with early access to videos, Discord roles, all of the good stuff, then you can check out my Patreon and YouTube membership service pinned in the comments below. And yes, in case you were wondering, that is what Patreon's logo looks like these days. They ditched their really cool orange colour scheme and just took the letter P and increased the border on it until it looked like this, which is an inspired choice. Anyway, now we get to talk about Soldier. So, Soldier is a bit of a weird one because this is a man who has the TF2 equivalent of God and anime on his side. Everything just kind of either works or goes right for him, and I was very tempted to just say that he'll live forever out of sheer dumb luck. But if I have to be incredibly realistic about things, I think Soldier will perish due to lead poisoning. It was revealed in one of the earlier comics that the entire town of Two Fort has been poisoned with lead via the water supply, and Soldier is one of the only Mercs who doesn't drink the bottled water that they give them. And the fact that he's made it as far as he has in life currently is testament to the power of the TF2 equivalent of God and anime. However, in the TF2 comics, they explain that lead poisoning is the reason why the entire town of Two Fort is entirely stupid. And I will be dead honest with you, that's not a million miles off how lead poisoning actually works, as a build-up of lead in the body can cause certain organs to shut down or stop functioning properly, like the brain, for example. So it's quite shocking to realise that we're already seeing the effects of Soldier dying in motion. The man's probably going to be dead by the end of this video. Now, with all of the Mercs we've covered, it's actually quite surprising that none of them have died on the job yet. So let's change that by talking about Pyro, who I think will accidentally burn himself to a crisp one day. Now, when designing Pyro, the developers were absolutely playing with fire. Pyro's flame retardant suit might be flame retardant, but through my own antics, I've found out that most flame retardant things are not fireproof. And considering how Pyro is Pyro, I think it's very likely one day he'd just walk into a barn on a mission, decide to set it on fire, and just kind of sit in it. Which is probably not a good thing to do when you have 10 gallons of compressed gas on your back. Wow, this really is a cheery video, isn't it? Anyway, we'll talk about Sniper next, because he's one of the only mercs that we know is actually dying of something. You see, kidney failure is a powerful thing, so powerful that I'm not going to make the joke for the third time. But I will tell you that Jurati is equally as powerful, and since Sniper takes Saxton Hale's Jurati pills, which triple the size of his kidneys, he also needs to take Saxton Hale's pain tonic, which stops him from feeling the pain of his organs shutting down. Now, in case you didn't catch any of the red flags in that, taking the Saxton Hale Jurati pills triples the size of your kidneys and shuts down some of your organs, which I'm just going to assume means it also shuts down your kidneys. Now, to suppress my inner biology nerd, the kidneys actually do a bunch of really cool things, but the main thing they're most well known for is filtering out excess water and toxins from the bloodstream, and if they shut down, they can't do that, and your blood is going to fill up with those things, and that can be incredibly fatal. So it seems that Jurati is a very, very short-term solution to spies. I'm amazed Sniper is still living. Now, speaking of organ failure, let's talk about Medic next, because I actually think he's going to die of something pretty similar. So Medic has a big interest in all sorts of exotic animal organs. In fact, the main thing he did with the TF Classic team was basically just sew exotic animal organs into them. And so I think it is very, very likely at some point in the future when he notices he's starting to age and things are starting to fail, that he will try to do surgery on himself. And he'll probably give himself, I don't know, 13 whale bladders or something like that. And organ rejection is a very real thing for the human body, and so I ultimately think that Medic is going to have the worst death on this list. I think he's going to die a Frankenstein's monster of his own creation. I never told you this was going to be a happy video, but something I did tell you 2 months ago was to fix these numbers. And you know what? To your credit, you did fix them slightly, so well done. But slightly isn't fixed, so fix them. Fix them! Fix these numbers! Okay, we'll talk about Scout next, and fun fact, this is the longest I've ever gone in a video like this without talking about Scout. I have absolutely no reason why, it's always just a good idea to get him out the way first. And maybe I should have done that for this video as well, because coming up with how Scout is going to die is difficult because there are so many ways he potentially could. But in the end, I concluded that the majority of those ways result in some sort of fight, and therefore I think Scout is going to get his nose punched through his skull. When it comes to a death like this, Scout is absolutely a man who would go looking for it. He's the kind of man who would pick a fight he'd absolutely know he couldn't win under any circumstances, but still kind of thought he would slightly and would just die horrifically. Now, I guess something I should have mentioned at the beginning of the Sniper segment was that all three of these previous mercs have all died in the comics, yet I'm not counting that in this video, because, well, at the very end of the final 7th comic, they're all still alive. So this video pretty much hinges on how I think they will ultimately meet their end. So, December 4th, 1987 is going to be an interesting year. So, I'll let you in on something here, my dear viewer. I was fully done recording the bonus segment for the bonus characters we're going to talk about in a minute, and then I realised, oh god, I left Heavy in the car. I completely forgot to talk about my maid in my video, and I'm very disappointed in myself. So here we are, here's the retrospective Heavy section, and I think he's probably going to die of like a heart attack or something. Heavy is not a thin man, and neither is he a light one. Go figure. But those in combination with a high meat diet and the fact that he's aging probably means he's going to have a heart attack pretty soon. It's not healthy to be overweight, a statement I genuinely cannot believe is considered controversial to say in this day and age. But to cut Heavy some more slack than he's already eating, I guess it is his job to be heavy, so I understand why he hasn't made any healthy life decisions yet. But now is as good as a time as any. And with that, we progress to our final mercenary, Engineer. Now normally with these kinds of videos, the list is just completely random, and I don't really think too much about the placements of anyone except for the first slot. However, this time I have thought very hard about Engineer, and he has deliberately come last in this video because I think he's the only merc who's just going to live a normal life and die of old age. After working with the administrator on her life extending machine for such a long amount of time, Engineer seems to be a man who is very determined not to live forever, and he also seems pretty determined to not really interfere with the natural flow of things one way or the other. So I don't think he'd go looking for a death, I don't think he'd be trying to avoid it, I think it would just come naturally to him. And I guess that's a bit of a sweet note to end our main mercs on. Now, as previously promised, you're still here, so let's talk about some bonus characters. Starting with Miss Pauline, I think she's also going to die of old age. We don't really know what happens to Miss Pauline at the end of the comics, but I think it's implied that she takes over the administrator's job, which means she stops going into caves, burying bodies, getting shot at, all the kind of stuff she normally does. And so I think her future is probably pretty safe and behind a desk, and unless paperclip related injuries used to be considered a lot more fatal back in the day, I think she'll live out a probably normal and relatively healthy life from here on out. Now, speaking of the other woman in the Team Fortress group, I think Zana is probably also going to die of lead poisoning. Somehow her and Soldier managed to raise 2 children that didn't immediately die at the age of 0. But considering how there's a high chance that they've been all drinking the 2 Fort water as well, things are going to go pretty bad pretty soon. So I'm grouping her in with Soldier on this one. And finally, as for Saxton Hale, I think this final page in the 7th comic is implied that him and Mags either get mauled to death by, big cats or jump off a cliff. So it's one of the two. And that'll do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. And an extra special thanks to my elite tier Patreons and YouTube members. I am Skylar, Sukos, and the real Hatsune Miku. I'm so honoured to have you here. And with all that being said, I will see you later down the sunny road.